Hey there, welcome back for another deep dive.
Always great to be back.
You guys sent in some seriously interesting stuff for us to dig into, and
Yeah, looks like we've got some fascinating topics on the docket.
we're talking AI and get this, taxes.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently, some people out there think taxing robots is the way of the future.
Now that's a head scratcher.
It's wild, right? But then we're going to switch gears totally and look at how AI could actually, like, reshape the entire continent of Africa.
It really highlights the sheer breadth of AI's potential impact. From those big picture societal questions to really hyper-specific applications.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's dive right into this whole AI tax thing. There was an article from AI Deep Dive, call from Parliament Tax Committee Chair for Artificial Intelligence Levy, that really caught my eye.
I saw that one.
It basically asks, what if instead of freaking out about robots taking our jobs, we just taxed them? Like, how would that even work?
Well, at first glance, it sounds like something straight out of science fiction. But when you dig a little deeper, the concern is very real. I mean, the EU Parliament is seriously grappling with this potential curveball AI's throwing at tax revenue,
Makes sense, yeah.
especially income tax, which is, a major funding source for governments.
Yeah, because if machines start doing all the jobs, governments are going to miss out on all that income tax money.
Exactly. And we're talking about a huge chunk of their budget here. The article mentioned that a big portion of tax revenue in the EU comes from labor taxes. So naturally, folks are starting to get a little anxious about what happens when those jobs get automated.
Okay, yeah.
And it's not like this is some distant, sci-fi future problem either. The IMF is already waving a little red flag saying AI is integrating into the economy crazy fast.
So is that where this whole tax the robots idea comes in?
That's one proposed solution that's making the rounds.
I mean, they give this example in the article of this AI VAT advisor, VHL, that can supposedly do the work of a tax expert, like in seconds.
Yeah.
But how do you even put a price tag on something that complex?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, literally.
Right.
There are definitely strong arguments on both sides of this issue. Some people say, hey, listen, if AI is raking in the dough, it should be taxed just like any other money-making entity, right?
Yeah, I mean, on the surface, it makes sense.
It does, but then it gets really complicated really quickly. Trying to pin down what exactly qualifies as AI activity for tax purposes, that's a huge can of worms.
Oh,
Is it the software itself, the data it uses, the results it spits out? It's messy.
yeah.
And then there's always the risk of companies pulling a fast one, moving their operations to countries with friendlier AI tax laws just to avoid paying up.
Oh, for sure, playing the system. So it's not as simple as just like slapping a price tag on a robot and calling it a day.
Not even close. This whole debate forces us to ask a much bigger question. Is taxing AI directly even the right approach? Or are there smarter, more effective ways to deal with this potential hit to income from traditional jobs?
Okay, now you've got me thinking.
That's what we're here for. This is where things get really interesting because it forces us to rethink our entire economic model in the context of this rapidly changing technological landscape.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I think it's important for us to pause here for a sec, though, and let that sink in for our listeners.
Absolutely.
Because this isn't just about robots and taxes, right? This is about the future of work, your paycheck, and what role the government's going to play in a world that's, like, changing faster than ever thanks to AI.
It's about adapting to a whole new ballgame.
Okay, so we've tackled this whole AI tax situation. Phew. Now let's do a complete 180 and look at this other article you sent from the Financial Times.
Oh, yeah, that one's fascinating.
Can AI help Africa close the development gap? This one feels like almost the opposite of the tax thing. Instead of AI being this job-stealing threat, it's like this powerful tool for good, solving some of the world's biggest problems.
Right. It's a perspective we don't always hear enough about, especially in the West. I mean, we tend to get caught up in the whole automation and jobs thing.
For sure.
But in a lot of the developing world, especially in Africa, AI is being seen as this potential game changer, like a catalyst for progress.
Totally. And they had some really incredible examples in this article. Like there's this speech recognition app developed by Google that's helping this Ghanaian Berber who was born with a cleft palate.
I read about that. Wow.
Yeah, he uses it to communicate more clearly with his customers, and it's like totally transformed his life.
Yeah. It's a perfect example of how AI can empower individuals in ways we might not even consider at first. Think about it. Education, healthcare, just basic communication even, accessing information.
Yeah.
The potential is massive if we use these technologies thoughtfully.
Right. And it's not just like small scale stuff either. They were talking about using AI to like predict famines and even develop flood prediction models that are like outperforming traditional methods,
Yeah, the applications are really impressive.
which is amazing.
It is. AI has the potential to address those really big systemic challenges, especially in places with limited resources. But, and this is a big but,
Oh, here it comes.
the article doesn't sugarcoat things. It acknowledges the potential downsides too.
Right, right. Like that whole AI divide thing where there's a risk that AI could actually like make the gap between the haves and have-nots even bigger if we're not careful.
Exactly. If AI development ends up concentrated in the hands of a few powerful companies, wealthy nations, it could exacerbate existing inequalities. Imagine if all the best educational resources were only in English or Mandarin.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Entire communities would be left behind.
And they gave that example of how many students in Africa already have to learn in like their second or third language because educational materials aren't even available in their native tongue.
It's already a huge disadvantage.
Huge. But, AI could change that.
It could. It all comes down to making sure the benefits of AI are accessible, equitable. This article highlighted concerns about data exploitation too, the need for some ethical guardrails around AI development,
Yeah.
and the importance of local communities having a say in how these technologies are used. It's not enough to just show up with some shiny new tech. It has to actually benefit the people it's meant to serve.
So it's kind of a balancing act then.
Mm-hmm.
Huge potential for good, but also potential for like making things worse if we're not smart about it.
That's a good way to put it. It's like this really powerful tool that can either help us build bridges or, widen the gaps that already exist.
What was your big takeaway from this article? What really stuck with you?
For me, it was that emphasis on looking beyond all the hype, getting real about tangible, real-world impact. There's this quote, "Nobody needs cherries if they don't already have the cake."
Okay. Okay.
Basically, technology is only as good as the foundation it's built on. You can't just throw AI at problems and hope for the best. You have to address those underlying issues. Infrastructure, education, all of that.
That's a really good point. It's easy to get caught up in the possibilities without thinking about the bigger picture.
Right, and that leads to another critical point the article touched on, data exploitation.
Oh, yeah. That part was a little concerning. With AI needing all this data to learn,
Yeah.
made me wonder, who controls that data, especially in places where the digital world is still emerging?
It's a valid concern. The article mentions some organizations are starting to ask some tough questions about whether big tech companies, with all their resources, might end up exploiting data from developing nations, especially for things like building language models.
Yeah, like if they can get people to use their AI tools, they're basically getting free labor to train their models,
Yeah.
right? And then maybe turning around and making money off that data somewhere else.
Exactly. And that brings up all sorts of complex issues around digital colonialism, data ownership, and making sure that the people who are providing the raw material, the data for AI, are actually benefiting from it, not just the companies collecting it.
Wow, okay, this is a lot. So going back to the original question, can AI bridge the development gap?
Mm.
Or is it going to make things worse? It feels like we've stumbled upon way more questions than answers here.
I think that's the nature of these deep dives, though, isn't it? We're dealing with really complex issues, and there aren't always easy answers. But the good news is that the conversation is happening.
Right, right.
People are thinking critically about the potential pitfalls, and there are a lot of bright minds out there working on solutions focused on ethical development, local leadership, equitable access, all of that.
It's interesting, right? Both of these articles we've talked about, even though they're about such different things, they both kind of point to AI being this, like, huge force for change.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not like a guaranteed slam dunk, right? We can't just, like, unleash all this AI on the world and cross our fingers and hope for the best.
Right, it's not a magic bullet.
We have to be smart about it,
Yeah.
careful about how we develop it, how we actually use it.
I completely agree. And that's a theme we see popping up everywhere in discussions about AI.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's about, like we talked about, taxing AI, using it for development, or really any other application you can think of.
Yeah.
AI itself, the technology, it's not inherently good or bad.
Yeah.
It's all about the choices we make, right?
Right.
How we develop it, how we use it. That's what makes all the difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like, what's that saying? With great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. And we are talking about some serious power here. The stakes are
Oh,
high.
sure.
We're not just shaping the future for ourselves, but for, our kids, our grandkids, generations to come.
That makes me think about something you said earlier about like moving beyond the hype and focusing on the actual real world impact.
Yeah, yeah,
It's easy to get caught up in all the what ifs and the possibilities.
yeah.
But ultimately, what matters is how this technology is actually changing people's lives, right?
100%. And that's why it's so crucial to have these conversations that get different perspectives. We need to hear from the people who are like right there on the front lines, the ones who are living with the impact of AI every day. Whether it's that barber in Ghana, using AI to communicate, or a farmer in Africa who's benefiting from those AI flood predictions, we need to hear those stories.
And not just the feel-good stories either.
Oh, for sure. We can't shy away from the tough stuff.
We need to hear from the people who might be negatively impacted by this, the ones who might get left behind if we're not careful.
Absolutely. We've got to be honest about the risks, about the potential for technology to make existing inequalities even worse. We have to be really intentional, really deliberate about making sure that AI benefits everyone, that everyone has a chance to help shape this future.
It's a lot.
Mm.
Like, it's exciting, but it's also a lot to wrap your head around.
It is. AI is complex, and the implications touch every part of our world. But that's what makes it so fascinating to explore, right?
Yeah, I think that's what I love about these deep dives. They make you think. They challenge you to dig a little deeper, to look beyond those easy answers, to really grapple with these big, complex issues. Hopefully, we all come away with a little better understanding of the world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So until next time, folks, keep those questions coming, keep that curiosity alive, and never stop diving deeper.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.